Welcome to Pixel Chasing, the podcast where we talk to fascinating people about the most exciting and disruptive trends affecting our world today. With a focus on innovation, science and technology, we engage with the trailblazers and influencers who are taking an active role in shaping our future and signposting the current winds of change. So whether you're walking the dog, looking for some background content for your workout, or are simply looking to learn from experts in their fields, there'll be something for you on Pixel Chasing. Welcome to Pixel Chasing. I'm your host Michael Marciano, and today we have none other than the Rembrandt of real estate, the Picasso of PropTech, the Blake of the built environment, Antony Slumbers. For those of you without an appreciation of Antony and his earlier careers, that intro would have made much sense, but hopefully his own bio will. Antony is a globally recognized speaker, advisor and writer on PropTech and Space as a Service. A serial entrepreneur, he has founded and exited several PropTech software companies and now consults real estate boards on their transformation, technology and innovation strategies. He writes an influential blog at antonyslumbers.com and is a prolific tweeter at Antony Slumbers. In 2020, he co-founded the Real Innovation Academy, an online real estate training company. With regard to today's podcast, as soon as the Zoom link connected Antony and I was blown away by his fantastic linen purple shirt, and that amazement started us down a conversational path which led to all sorts of places, culminating in his backpacking around America in his youth. Now, I've saved you all much of that albeit exciting, but maybe not relevant musings that we had. And I'll be dropping you off at a point in the conversation where we began to get more focused. So as always, I hope you enjoy and have fun. This is, I guess, kind of a nice segue into this idea of like, what do you think the implications are? Because obviously, if you look historically over real estate being a location-based industry and having key buildings around certain routes and paths that are, obviously drivers have a maximum number of hours they can drive for, therefore there is value in the locations of buildings for people to sleep and rest and pick up. What happens to real estate when ultimately we have vehicles driving themselves? And ultimately, what happens to those, the golden triangle, these ideas of highly valuable assets over certain routes that are reflective of the old way of driving, when suddenly we're going to have drone deliveries, autonomous vehicles? Doesn't that have a massive knock-on effect on the value of real estate?
I think it has to, and to an extent it's already happening, isn't it? Because it's not so much autonomous vehicles, but it's last mile delivery and rapid delivery that everyone is wanting now. So slightly the nature of the portfolio of industrial spaces you need is slightly different. It has to get much more dynamic and much closer to the customer, which is a bit like the these all these on-demand grocery companies that are popping up now, which I still think is slightly like Uber. Is a VC gift to the customer. It's basically just subsidizing everything at the moment. But the idea there is that they would understand enough about the demand within that area that they only ever stock those 39 items. And they're always there, and I can see that if you've got enough if you've got enough data, and that's pretty much how Amazon works, isn't it? It knows where people are and what they're likely to buy, and
depending on what day of the week it is, and there are holidays coming up, and there are events coming up. That gets really exciting. It's a hyper. I've always have this sort of idea, wouldn't it be cool to have a shop that was, just really seasonal? I say really cool. The idea that a shop that basically it was always varying what it was selling based upon the events around it, and we're seeing it.
But it's a supermarket. Supermarkets have actually done it for years.
but
they
have had bigger footprints, haven't they? So I guess the idea is that they've been far bigger to cover. They give you everything without being selective. Whereas we just had one open up near where I live. There's a Zap opening up, and it's not a big unit. It used to be a Tops Tiles, and now it's a Zap one. And I had a peek in it the other day, and like it's not big. So they're clearly being. I'm not familiar with all the processing, but just so data driven because I had a peek in, and it was the most random selection of things they had inside. But clearly, they know that people of this area, this demographic, this age, location, this is the stuff that they want quickly.
No, it's very interesting how. I'm slightly ambivalent about the whole thing actually, because I think it's quite cool, but for God's sake, how lazy are we all getting? Do we really need someone to come and deliver us a bloody toothpaste? Do you think? I don't know. Is that just ridiculous or okay? But I can't see how the numbers work though.
But that's the thing. As you sort of alluded to, the numbers are always secondary at this stage. It's a land grab. Who can get the most data? And let's work out profitability in the future when we IPO. Like that seems to always be the way they operate. But I wonder.
Uber's done that for 10 years now, and it's still nowhere near making a profit. And we'll never make a profit. Uber's never going to make a profit.
But that hasn't stopped big.
But it's made so much money.
It doesn't stop. I reckon if we can, I'm sure there are things we can reflect on that feel superfluous to our needs now to people who were like 50 years ago. And so I wonder, we will look back and say, I can't believe you ever. I guess the question really is to what extent do we see our time as commodities? And if it is something which is very monetizable, so my half an hour journey to the shops is actually worth X, Y, and Z. And someone like yourself now, who uses their time a lot to deliver knowledge courses, you can put a number on that and say, actually, now you may not put a number, you may say, actually, I enjoy going. I reckon you're probably a Waitrose man. So I enjoy shopping at Waitrose. So I'm going to go and walk.
Funnily enough.
I'm going to pop in the AirPods and I'm going to go listen to some classical music, and that's fine. That is a purpose. But if it's purely to get food to bring home, you got to weigh that up versus, right, I can deliver a course online and that's going to deliver this revenue.
That is true. But you know what it really is? It's actually a return of domestic service. So if I was upper class in the 19th century, this is exactly what I have. Someone delivers it to me. Go and get me this. Go and get me that. It's actually the return of domestic service.
But democratizing it for everybody.
Yes, which is fine, so long as you disregard that the person who's doing it is basically getting screwed.
Agreed. I was speaking to someone recently who's saying that delivery drivers, they can make a fortune. I mean, it obviously they've got no security, and we've seen it with although some of the laws, some of the recent cases are forcing these large organisations to recognise these 0-hour workers as full-time employees. But what's been interesting is some of these people who historically were doing jobs like kitchen porters, where they were working terrible hours, and all of a sudden now they've got flexibility. Now, again, I'm not advocating that. I think it's a fantastic full experience. But when I was speaking to some people recently in the restaurant business, they were saying that the reason we now can't get porters or chefs is because these are people who historically. Yeah, they were like, look, they worked awful hours. They worked in the back of a kitchen on their feet. Now they're just driving and they're making more money.
Yeah, it is of course a relative thing. It's a shitty job, but there's shitter jobs.
shitty jobs. Yeah,
but I don't think. But I think I'm not sure it's actually going to end up being good for restaurants either, because they're taking
30%.
They're taking 30%, and I don't know. Maybe we'll just give up on restaurants, because restaurants won't be able to provide a full service whilst they keep giving away 30%. But I don't know. Once everyone, I don't know. You see, I live too far away to order takeaways all the time. I can order Domino's, but there's not really anything else I can order, because I'm like a mile and a half from the centre of Guildford. And if I was half a mile that way, I could have Deliveroo deliver anything, and maybe I'd have think about it differently then. But otherwise, I don't know. I just find them. I find them funny industries because this has been going for years now, and I know the whole game was, yes, land grab. Once you own everything, then you can make a killing. But it's not looking like that's going to happen. I mean, Deliveroo had the best business ever during the lockdown,
And still didn't make money. Also,
and still
didn't turn a profit. Yeah.
and then didn't turn a profit. And you think, is there something? Is there a business model here that in reality just isn't going to work? And but it has consequences in the meantime, because other industries don't happen. Other people don't make money because this lot's sucking up everything. I don't know.
It's tricky because also the more they take, it comes out the pocket of the restaurants who already work on very, very thin margins. So that they are, the more they make, often it's at the detriment to those restaurants. And those restaurants are, the challenge is you're always fully staffed, fully stocked, and you have a bad day, your outlay is still the same. And when you finally have a good day, 30% is going towards Deliveroo. Now the flip side is, one would argue that the platform gives greater visibility to your product, and therefore you get more customers. But for those who don't get the benefit, they cannibalize the revenue, because the customers who would have come in or who would have picked up directly are now going via Deliveroo. And I wonder if this is a nice segue to say that actually there's a bit of parallels with The Office. So great restaurants will survive where there's an experience. So I will go out and go to a restaurant where it's an event, it's an occasion. I want to celebrate. I want to go for a purpose. Now, it may be the case that everything else that's purely functional, a pizza, I'll get delivered home. But I will get dressed up and I'll go out for an event and go to a great restaurant. So again, will they survive? The ones who, when you walk in, you think, this is a treat. Yeah. And I think your views, as anyone who knows you, are not subtle on these things with regards to The Office. And there's one thing that I think aligns quite nice, which is, we can't just rest on laurels. We have to give people, and you are, as you know, one of the earlier proponents of looking at tenants as customers, as people that we need to service and serve. And I think that in general can be seen across the board. It's all about the value we give people. People will go places where there's great value. I'll travel quite far sometimes to get a really good experience. And I think people need to invest in that side of things. So it's probably worth, I guess, even touching upon that. But I guess even before that, because I mentioned that obviously you're fairly vocal on these things. To what extent have you found that your voice is able to be promoted far and wide these days with regards to your platforms that you have to do so? Because not a day goes by where I'm not bombarded by your voice. Because I hear your voice when I read your notes on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I do attribute your voice to it. To what extent does that allow you to further promote your views and as an influencer help sort of to create those views and link to that? Like, what were you doing before Twitter? Like, before you had because obviously you've been in the game for decades. How were you? If it's like this whole chicken and egg. To become an influencer, you need followers. To have followers, to become an influencer. How did you go about building that following with the influence? Because don't forget, because if you're somebody just sprouting nonsense, you get no traction. So clearly, at some point, what you were saying was resonating. So can you just talk about how that happened?
Before Twitter, I pretty much actually didn't have any voice, because I've never particularly liked classic networking, and I've certainly never liked the classic real estate networking of 500 blokes in blue suits all alone in one room. I've never really gone for that. So I think it just wasn't like that. I mean, the beauty of Twitter is that if you take it seriously over time, you can build up the most fantastic list of people to follow. And my Twitter stream now is just the world's most interesting thing, because I've pruned it and curated it, if you like, for so long. I've now got thousands of incredibly interesting people all over the place, and it acts sort of like a filter to the internet for me. But yes, what it does do though, which I think is so good, is it allows you to build a relationship with someone in such a way that when you do actually meet, you actually tend to know the person quite well. So there's loads of people that I'd known on Twitter for years before I actually met them. And then when you meet them, it's almost like meeting someone that you've known forever. And it is extremely effective like that. I mean, it's something you do have to work at it, and you do have to push a few buttons every now and again. I mean, it does help being controversial. I never specifically think up something controversial for the sake of it, but I don't necessarily filter the thoughts that are controversial because I'm very lucky. I'm not aligned to anyone. So many people and so many interesting people actually cannot be as interesting as they might be on something like Twitter because they can't say it because of who they are.
What's in their bio? Please note that what I'm saying isn't about the. There's so many caveats before you've even started reading. You can see they're being censored. There isn't that freedom of expression.
Or I'm a main board director of this London-based REIT. They're not really gonna say anything really interesting about real estate. So it does help the people who are unaligned. But mainly, I think Twitter's perfect for curious people, people who are interested in different things and wanting to get hold of constantly hoovering up new ideas. But it's also so now I was going to say one of the things that I always say to my clients, or people say to me, well, what do you do? What do your clients pay you for? And I say, well, I read all the things that they should read, but they don't have time to read it. And I read it and analyze it and digest it, and then I give it to them in an hour. And they could read it, they could digest it, and they probably end up with exactly the same conclusions, but they don't have time because they got busy jobs there doing everything else. So the whole thing about, if you like, informed commentary it only works if you do a shed load of work at the back end, and you basically just constantly got to hoover things up, and you've also got to have the time to sort of ruminate on stuff. Go for a walk, think about it.
Well, as you say, there's so much information out there. Like one thing I struggle with is that I subscribe to a few newsletters, and actually, if I miss a few days of reading them, I've got 10 to read up on, and then there's 20, and actually there's not enough time in the day. So, to your point, it's about curating, and ultimately, the value you bring is you've done the hard work in curating what to read, when to read, and have done it, and people pay you for that. Is Twitter where you met Draw?
Yes, yeah. I mean, Draw's the classic case. I probably met Draw certainly 2, maybe 3 years before we ever met, and we've still only met three times.
Really?
For a total of about. We've met in New York once for about 3 hours, but 3 hours over here and one other time. Yeah, so probably a day we've actually met. And then it's the beauty of the internet, isn't it? Draw's based in New York. I'm here, and we can set up jointly a online global learning system.
It's just fascinating. And I think, like, when you look at what COVID's done, and what I've found in particular is it's completely normalized virtual interaction. It's normalized spontaneous communication. It's made accessing people far easier, I found. I think it would have been odd, for me at least, pre-COVID. So, hey, should we have a video call with a stranger? I don't know, it just didn't feel natural, a bit invasive.
Yeah, you wouldn't
have done it. Whereas now it's wonderful. And I wonder, you've had so many, anyone just needs to look at your website and look at the long list of things you've done. When you compare I used to get the work and effort and challenges in setting up those previous, let's say, slightly more analog, old school business, even though at the time they were, avant-garde themselves, to what you're doing now. Is it night and day? The ability to, I know a lot of what goes into your courses, but that ability to, from sitting on your bottom in your home with a colleague across the world, to set up, as you say, a global business. Is it just completely different to how it used to be?
Well, as an example, when I started Vicinity, which was the property management software company that I co-founded with Broadgate Estates, the management arm of British Land, back in 2001. To launch, we had to buy £35,000 worth of computer kit, and we had to buy two big racks, servers, massive great servers, get them installed and everything like that. To set up the academy, I think we set it up for free and then ran it for £100 a month or something like that. And you don't have to do anything. There's so many things that are just done. So many processes that you can outsource. I mean, we use a lot of Zapier, which is this if this then that thing. So if an email comes in like this, do this, and if this form comes in, put the details in that spreadsheet. And there's the ability to automate so much of business is a huge thing. And I mean, it's one of the things I think is a lot of people don't realize that the most valuable software company in Europe is actually UiPath, which is a robotic process automation company based in Romania or somewhere like that, and they're worth 45 billion or something like that. Really? It's huge, absolutely huge. But they do this, because so much of business. I mean, it's one of the things we talk about on the course, and it's one of the things I've always talked about for so long. The point is, any task that someone does during the day, which is structured, repeatable, or predictable, will be automated. And about half of the tasks that everyone does globally are structured, repeatable, predictable. They're things that you can turn into an algorithm. If this, then that, or if this, then that, and do that. And they're all being automated. And that's what robotic process automation is all about. So much of real estate is about taking data out of one system, which doesn't talk to another bloody system, and someone's got to sit there and rekey it. So much of that is being taken away. I mean, it's not just real estate. Real estate's particularly bad because it tends to have lots of systems that definitely don't talk to each other. Not talking to each other is part of the business model.
That's sometimes by design.
It's absolutely by design. But so much of that is going. And what the internet enables you to do is to automate all the process in running a business. And the more you can automate the process, the more you should be in a position to enable everyone to have more time to think.
But it's one thing that your, wonderful partner Draw writes a lot about, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts. I mean, obviously you're a beneficiary of this because you are an informed person with a platform to communicate the pros and cons and provide a role that is advising. Not being you, do these things fill you with dread or excitement when we talk about automation? And there are two often distinct schools of thought here. One which is that no, we're done. Universal income, we'll be sitting all day playing sports and sitting in the fields. The other being no, we'll innovate around it. We've always had revolutions that have changed processes, reduced the number of workers to do a task, and we will innovate out of it. Where do you sit on that, or is it not as binary? Is there a middle ground you think that we get to? Because you've got children, I've got young children. When I look to the future, it's hard for me to imagine what their future looks like going down this path.
I think societally, it's something we need to take more seriously, because the machines most definitely are going to take a lot of tasks. They're not going to take so much jobs, because most jobs cannot be totally automated away, but there's an awful lot of things that can be automated away. And people say, oh yeah, but it was the same thing happened before when it was 98% of people worked in farms, and then at the end of the century it was 5%, but everyone had jobs. Yeah, but what they forget is there was a thing called famously known as the Engels pause, which was like 30, 40 years, where people essentially came off the farms and were stuffed for 30, 40 years. Living in slums is why Dickens exists. Most people did really badly, and then eventually you find ways of you find new things to do. But it's not an automated process that you lose that job, therefore you can go and do this. It's going to happen over time. That said, I am actually a firm believer that the future of most humans' jobs is actually not going to be technical. It's going to be human, because I'm also a great believer that the machines are going to be able to do a lot of things a lot better than us. But what machines can do is not the same as what humans can do. Machines are very good at structured, repeatable, predictable. They're much less good at judgment, for instance. Machines have no judgment. Machines have to be programmed for judgment. Machines have to be programmed for critical thinking. Machines have to be programmed for imagination, design, all that sort of stuff. And that's what humans have to do. Humans, as we get more technical, I actually think the need in humans is actually going to be to really increase one's human skills. So what are humans good at? Which is all the stuff, as I said, like judgment, abstract and critical thinking, imagination, design, empathy. Machines have no empathy. Now, we all know loads of people who don't have a lot of empathy as well, but human beings are capable of having empathy.
But isn't that to some degree, without getting too deep into what consciousness is and the soul and all the rest of it? Some degree that's learned behavior, isn't it? You learn empathy through interaction, through school, through communications and experience. And one just needs to look at the advancements around GTP3 and look how far that's come in the past few years. And of course,
exactly,
there are what we saw online when that got released was obviously the best of the best. But the fact is, it wrote its own article about itself. I've read it in the Guardian. So, and it spoke about this. It spoke about a sense of self and awareness that I understand that you may think that I am dangerous, etc. Now, of course, if you read into it, there were issues around it. But how can we be so sure that with all the data we're collecting now, the amount of data we're collecting that we're able to synthesize and reflect on and sort of train these machines on, that in 10 years they won't have those capabilities? There's some great companies out there doing great copywriting work, for example, for all AI.
Well, in 10 years they probably will have that capability. I mean, if you think about it, if you just carry on with Moore's law, and everyone says, "Oh, well, Moore's law's dead," but because people are using different ways to achieve the same doubling, it's not. Your phone will be 8,000 times as powerful in 10 years' time as now. No, what is it? It's 150 times as powerful in 10 years, 8,000 times in 20 years, a million times in 30 years. So yeah, they will absolutely will get there, but there's still, the point is the technology still needs to be guided by humans. So there's still going to be lots of work about, GPT-3 didn't just happen. It didn't just come out, it was designed to be. And lots of the problems with AI at the moment is because it's designed by young 30-year-old blokes in San Francisco. And so it's perfect for them, and it understands exactly what a young 30-year-old bloke in San Francisco needs, wants and desires, but knows nothing about anyone else, which is why you get all these problems with AI and bad judgments and lots of not such good things. But the point is, even regardless of that, this is going to happen anyway. So what are humans going to do? And humans are going to need to get better and are going to place higher value on human things. And I mean, I have this sort of iffy feeling about all the talk at the moment, about the metaverse. Everything's the metaverse now. So suddenly,
Zuckerberg talks about it now, and
everything's the metaverse. And if you're okay, boomer, if you don't think, oh, the metaverse is inevitable. But to me, I can quite see how a lot of components of what people are talking about with the metaverse, i.e., having access to all digital information about a physical space available when you're in that physical space, and that's cool. But how many people really want to be represented by an avatar, as opposed to in that world, will people not be paying a lot more for truly human experiences? I mean, it's the same as going back to the restaurants. Yes, I can get everything delivered to me every day, but I can't go and sit in, I don't know, something like Brasserie ZL, which I love. The experience of sitting in Brasserie ZL, well, I can get them to send me the food, but it's not the same thing. and the experience isn't
But what
isn't
if
the
it?
same.
But this is the point. What if it does get to the same thing? There are a few things you would. I don't know if you saw Google I/O a few months ago. They showed
Yeah,
some amazing, whether it was a hologram or what it was. That technology where you look through a glass and you can see the person like how you and I are talking right now, but it would feel real. If you look at
but
what
that's
Zuckerberg believes
brilliant.
to
But
be,
that's
yeah.
fantastic,
But
isn't
you
it?
take all that
Yeah.
together, you throw in the metaverse, you throw in some really powerful VR, AR. Surely we can see a scenario people opt to live and spend more time in the space. One thing I sort of pondered on is imagine. I mean, you've seen how great HoloLens is and how actually it's iterated at time. It's being used a lot more in terms of engineering and medical science. But the idea is that on one hand, I could decorate a room. I could go out and I could buy stuff for it because why I want to see it. It looks nice and it's comfortable. I want to buy a big TV. I want to buy some nice lampshades because of the aesthetic. Well, on one hand, I could purchase it all. The other hand, I could just put my lens on, and I could, in that space, I can, stretch out the TV. I can drop something there. Can people start having better quality lives and experiences in alternative universes? Now, I have no idea if they would, but I can start to see very plausibly people preferring themselves and their lives when not in the physical space. And the physical space is where they dwell for the menial stuff like eating and sleeping, but for their interactions, for their engagements. You saw these huge, these concerts existing in Fortnite. People wandering
Mm.
around these open spaces, and I guess maybe you're not. I mean, I feel generationally, I feel a bit detached from that way of thinking. I'm not on my headphones playing Fortnite. I'm not living in an Xbox Live, but increasingly, young children are having their social engagements via live. So they're playing games, but whereas we might have gone to the park to play football and then socialize, they're doing the same thing, but they're doing it online. So they're playing FIFA, but they're talking about their homework, their mates, their days through the
Yeah,
headphones.
I'm completely with all that. And there is a degree to which Mark Andreessen said something like this recently. We have to remember that most people, there's an awful lot of people around the world who are not living the life of, frankly, us sort of nice middle class people. Our lives are very nice. So where we are, our physical environment
Yeah,
is very nice.
exactly.
So I don't really need another world to be nicer than where I already am because it's really nice. But of course, hundreds of millions of people are not in places which are particularly nice. And if you can offer them somewhere which is much nicer, then absolutely, there's a completely different imperative. And certainly, all these things that make your life easier are really good. But again, as your life gets easier, your meaning comes from the richness of other things. So it might be the richness of intellectual inquiry or interest in the arts or whatever, depth of knowledge and debate and I don't know, God forbid, politics and what have you. But the more time we have where all the boring stuff is taken away, what are we going to do with it? And I think we're actually going to do more interesting things with it. It's one of the arguments behind UBI, isn't it? Universal basic income. That there's some people who say, "Oh yeah, but if you do that, people will just sit around and watch telly all day." And there's another side of saying, "No, that's exactly the point. They won't. If they don't have to, if they are not constrained by having to do something they don't want to do because they have to earn some money, then they're much more likely to indulge in what's their hobby or what they're interested in, or I'm really interested in this, or I'm really interested in that, or I have this skill, that skill. Now I have the time to improve on it. The chances are people when they are freed from having to do something, I think most people do more interesting things. They get involved with more interesting things. What does a billionaire do all day? I bet he doesn't he or she. I bet they don't sit around watching telly all day.
They go to space, don't they?
Because they have so yeah they go to stupid space, yeah. Because they have optionality. They have the ability to do other things. And the whole point of there's no point in all this technology unless it enables us to live better lives. And I'm still a believer that a better life involves a life that is more reflective, and is the richness comes from having deeper interests. I don't think humans are naturally superficial. If freed from the need to do anything else, I don't think humans would be as superficial as they often are now. Because so much of what we do now is because everyone's been slaving away. You've been working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. So Saturday comes and you just want to do something crazy. But if you didn't have to do that, might you do more, does it, humans are going to free themselves up to be better humans.
This changes everything. This is a whole different construct. We're trained that you go to work to earn money to fill X, Y, and Z. Suddenly you take that away. There's a lot of learned behavior to degrees in our DNA that we feel that way. To suddenly say, right, the way we grow up through, at least in our early days, we go to school to learn. Why do we learn? Now, for most people, if you ask them the question, I don't think it's obvious that you learn for self-fulfillment. It's only to learn to get good grades, to go to university, to get a job. That seems to me to be the logical part to explain away. And what you're intimating is that becomes the end in itself. You learn to learn, and that's a very different structure.
But you got to remember, I'm a history of art graduate.
Precisely.
So I most defiantly did not go to university to do a degree with a particular career in mind. I mean, I did do for a while.
You're an art dealer, weren't you? So you still got a bit of a
yeah. So I did do that, and I still maintain that a history of art degrees is actually one of the greatest degrees to do, because there's not a day that goes past that I don't get satisfaction based on what I know because of my knowledge of art. I just wander around London, and every time I wander around London, I'll see something and I'll know something about it, and it sort of enriches my day. I'm a complete non-believer in the only reason for education is to get a job. The lifelong learning in itself is the prize, and lifelong learning should be the aim, particularly lifelong learning now, because you have to look at every single thing, and the world changes so much. I mean, if you take now at the moment, I'm not particularly into the metaverse, and most of the crypto crowd drive me absolutely nuts with their stupid laser eyes and all their to the moon, and it's inevitable, and Bitcoin will make the world a peaceful place. Just drives me absolutely mad. But I spend an inordinate amount of time reading about the bloody stuff, because I know there's something there. There is something there, and everything's sort of getting more complicated. Even on the particularly on the crypto stuff. The interesting stuff about crypto is actually the more complicated stuff about rewiring the financial system and everything, as opposed to most people in crypto, because it's just, as David Gerard said, its number goes up. Why are you interested in it? Because the price goes up, and I've got some. As soon as it goes down, all the interest goes. But the interesting stuff is the complicated stuff. How can we restructure things? How can we deal with the thing I do like about the whole crypto thing is the notion that at the moment we're heading for a world where 12 companies could have half the world's trade, 70% of the world's trade. And it's almost like an inevitable consequence of the internet. It's network effect, to the rich go the spoils. And that's a really bad thing. People lose all agency when there's too powerful positions, companies. So the notion of crypto being able to decentralize things and give more agency back to individuals, that's deeply interesting, and that's a good thing. But against all that, I really don't think we need to worry too much about what we're going to do when we have no jobs. It's not going to happen it is going to happen in a rush in some ways, and it's happening all the time quite quickly. But I think there's a lot of other problems to solve before we get there.
What's problem number one?
Well, I suppose in many, I suppose you could say climate change is problem number one. If you want a big existential problem, you can't mess with this baby. Um, that's the biggest problem. I mean, in real estate, probably that should be the number one problem. 40% of all the world's carbon emissions, 30% of energy, and what are we doing? We're continually building new buildings. And then we run them at net zero and say, oh, we've got a net zero building. Yeah, but how much embedded carbon did you put in that building? Oh, well, don't mention that. We're talking operationally. We're net zero. Or we're net zero. How? Because we bought some green energy and then we bought loads of offsets.
Exactly, I say you trade it off.
Yeah. It's there's so much greenwashing and smoke and mirrors and stuff going on there that clearly, I think that area is the biggest threat, but perhaps the biggest opportunity. If you can actually, whoever is going to come up with the products and services that enable significant decarbonisation of the built environment has the biggest market the world has ever seen, because it's every building. The market is absolutely vast, and it's a necessity. So in terms of real estate, I think in many ways everything comes from sustainability. Because, for instance, if you take office buildings at the moment to take indoor air quality, if you have a highly sustainable mindset about how you are approaching your development or your operation of, say, an office building, if you have a highly sustainable minded approach, you will have good air quality, because it will be a byproduct of thinking in a holistic, sustainable way. You will then also have a productive building. Everyone talks about, you can't say whether an office space enables someone to be more productive or not. You can't measure productivity. You damn well can measure productivity, because there's endless peer-reviewed science about the effect of environmental conditions on cognitive function. So if Michael's sitting in a room with bad environmental conditions, his cognitive function is going to be X% less than if he was in good. So is he going to be more productive in that environment or in the good environment? Clearly,
Agreed.
You're going to be more productive when your cognitive function is maximized. So I see all these things are just circles. You need to deal with sustainability, because, my God, we need to deal with it. That in turn deals with health and well-being, and that in turn deals with productivity. So if you want a building and a workplace that has a future, the only reason it has a future is if you can enable people to be more productive in it than they would be if they weren't in it. And how do you do that? Well, to get people to get the hard output of productivity, you actually do need to worry about the soft stuff first. So they're happy and healthy, which is, what's that got to do with business? I don't care whether he's happy. He's not going to be productive. She's not going to be productive if they're not happy. Healthy, oh well, they're a bit overweight or whatever. Who cares? It has an impact. So if you want a productive person, you have to make them happy and healthy. So it's a completely joined up story of what is needed in real estate in the future. They're starting at the sustainability, which gives you the health and well-being, which deals with the productivity. But in order to get all that, you have to pay much more attention to the individual. So in order to make Michael or Antony as productive to enable them to be as productive as they can be, you need to understand what it is they are doing. And then what type of space do I need to put them in to do what they are doing in the most effective way? The Churchill thing of first we shape our buildings and then they shape us. That is so true now. You know what it's like. If you're in the perfect space for what you're trying to do, it has a real impact. And it might be the lighting, it might be the colors on the walls, it might be the temperature, it might be the noise, it might be all these different factors. But in order to make an individual as productive as possible, you need to know what the wants, needs, and desires of that individual are. So we've got this great movement in real estate, I think, from going from where we deal in products, big stonking steel and glass things that you can kick, and we're turning that all upside down, because that's not really what matters. What matters is each individual, and then extrapolate back from that, from who they are, what they need in technology, in space, in materials, in everything. And it's a completely different game. But I think that's why that one of the things we do on our course is we say we have a breakout. One of our breakout sessions is, do you remember there's films of the likes of Steve Jobs giving the graduation speeches at Stanford and stuff? And we say you're giving the graduation speech at a prestigious university. How do you? What do we say? How do you explain to people that they should come and work in real estate? And it's so interesting. Yesterday we had a big group of from Asia, 12 different Asian countries, and the number one thing they actually came back from that was that actually in real estate you can make a real impact, because real estate is where people spend 90% of their time in real estate. So who has the most connection with everyone, and who is able to impact the daily lives of everybody? People in real estate. And you start thinking about real estate in those terms, as opposed to, oh, well, it's an investment, and the cap rate's this and whatever. But no, this is you are in the industry that is having the most impact on the most people in the world. How can you make their lives better?
So who? The one thing about real estate is obviously in large swathes of it are owned by a handful of organizations, and then the rest are owned by, one might argue, unsophisticated smaller organizations and individuals. So practically, like how do we ever hit scale? Because obviously if you're relying on the tail end, that will never catch up before we hit maybe more difficult scenarios. If we rely on the more prominent end, well, if they don't play ball, there's no impact either. So who have you seen who's actually making inroads into this? Because all of this is nice, in terms of our rhetoric and wouldn't it be nice? But there's always that odd interim period where we've got to make money. At the end of the day, we can't talk to shareholders and say, don't worry, we made no money, but we offset our CO2. And I know it's increasing, and all these organizations have brought forward their timescales to being carbon neutral, etc. But how is it doable? And who have you seen who's actually making meaningful change in a way that is actually tangible and is a good example and inspiration to the industry?
I think the biggest force for change is actually the great big stick that's been wielded by the investment community. When Larry Fink says, climate risk is investment risk, i.e., my money's at risk. Don't lose my money. Then once the money's worried, it does something about it. And increasingly, I am hearing from people that that's all very well. I could do that, but I could never get it financed. If I'm not doing this XYZ sustainable, I won't get it financed. And you have to hope that pressure keeps coming, which I think it will do, because you've got the mix of the investment community is being sat on to be more sustainable. Regulations are tightening up and will have to keep tightening up. And then in some ways, the even more important point is your customer wants it. Your customer wants to be in the most sustainable buildings. And so you've got a sort of push and pull, which is going to make a difference. And I think of an example that was told to me by Stephen Skinner at HB Reavis. And he was talking about one particular building that they were letting, and it had gone through the whole process. And he had taken ages and all the usual arguments about all the usual things. And then eventually it was done, and they went out for a drink to celebrate. And he asked the boss of the company leasing it, well, why did you take our building? And he said, we wanted to be in the most sustainable building, and yours is the most sustainable building. Actually, that was all it was about. They wanted to be, and they wanted to be seen to be in the most sustainable building. And I think you are increasingly going to get this pressure that people just won't take the space. And then I think there's something. What lots of people talk about what's happened over the last 18 months has been an acceleration, whereas I think it's actually a revolution, because they say, oh, it's accelerated the adoption of remote working. Well, it's accelerated adoption that would have taken 60 years, because it was like a few percent growing, not very much. And then suddenly it's boom, it's 95%. But of course, the fundamental point is that whether we want an office or not, the majority of office occupiers have found out that they don't need it. They don't have to have it. And that is a fundamental turning upside down of the real estate industry. Because the real estate industry previously had customers who had to buy their product because they had to have an office. It's a completely different game when your customer doesn't need your product. They need to be made to want your product. And I genuinely think you'll find in the bigger companies will get more and more, frankly, anal about sustainability, because they're going to have, in that world, you might think it's all nonsense. You could have a Donald Trump attitude of who the hell cares, and it's all a fraud. But you're going to have to demonstrate it, because it's the nature of the wider market. So the bigger companies are going to be pushing like hell on the sustainability, and the smaller companies. So if you like, I don't know, up to people who would have taken up to 10,000 square feet, 1,000 square meters or something, which is 70% of all the occupied units in the City of London, for instance, are mainly sitting there saying, we don't actually need it. You started the conversation right at the beginning of, I will drive to somewhere if it gives me something I want. And that's going to be the score with an office. If I have to go to an office and it doesn't give me something more than I could have had not going, then now people just won't go. So I think the pressure is much stronger. So I have a feeling, the speed of change is obviously determined in real estate a lot to do with lease structures and lease events. If you're stuck on a long lease, there's not a lot you can do. Well, you can try to sublet it, but half of Manhattan's up for sublet, so there's a crowded market. But against that, I can't remember the statistic, but isn't it something like half of leases will have some sort of lease event in the next 4 or 5 years or something like that? It's a big percentage.
Exactly. There's a lag here. Obviously, to your point, people are locked in. Just because COVID happened doesn't change people's tenancy structure. So even if people want to drop their leases, that they can't until there's a break or there's a renewal conversation. And they, as you say, they are coming in the next few years, and that's when we'll see actually the consequence of COVID. Now, I guess one of two things will happen. Over the next 2 years, things return to normal and people then renew and re-gear and carry on. Or they go, right, here's our chance to completely reflect and review on what we want to do. We've had time, our colleagues have spent time working at home, this is what we want to do. And it may amount to, if we do take space, it may be a quarter of the size, I know you take some umbrage with people who articulate that people will be taking more space because they need more they need more room for
Because they're going to spread
meetings.
out.
Yeah.
They're going to spread out. Yeah.
So I
Get that
think
past the CFO.
yeah. So I think that's definitely a school of thought which is sort of promoted around online. But you're right. We haven't seen the impact on occupiers
No, we
because
haven't.
they're tied up in contracts.
Yeah. But they're also, as you said, they're not in the office yet. So they don't know what's going to happen. And it's so easy at the moment to you look at the markets and you look at companies, and just about every company says, yeah, it's fine, we're going to go hybrid. It takes about 2 questions before that all falls apart. Well, what is hybrid? What do you mean? And there's so many difficulties in that my belief is actually successful hybrid is going to be very difficult, and most companies aren't going to be able to do it because you cannot run a company and operate it as a hybrid company if you run it in the same manner as you did when it was an office-centric company. It just won't work. It's worked the last 18 months because effectively we've all been in the office, but the office has been at home. So we've all been in the same place. Once you start getting into in and out, you need to rethink how your companies work. And if you look at the smarter companies, you look at Salesforce are talking about, Dropbox are talking about, Atlassian are really interesting. They are really rethinking how their business is going to work. What are their workflows? How are they going to operate? How are they going to get jobs done? And Steven Sinofsky, actually, the chap who was for a long time the head of Windows at Microsoft, wrote a really good blog post recently talking about how companies are rethinking how they work. We were talking earlier about how do you set up an internet company now? Well, nowadays you just ask for what you want and it's done. It's a completely different methodology, completely different workflows. So unless companies very deliberatively think about how they are going to operate, how they are going to get stuff done, how are all tasks going to get done in a hybrid world, if they don't do that, they're going to come a cropper. And I'm pretty certain we're going to get 3-6 months into most people being, back. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be loads of screaming of, see, told you it didn't work, forget this, everyone back to the office. And it's going to be a disaster for a lot of companies. But my feeling is the smart companies are 100% taking this opportunity to rethink how they work and how can they leverage the new knowledge we have in terms of how we can work and what people want and remote and distributed. And my feeling is they're going to become the hyper competitive companies. If you are competing against a company that has rethought its processes to enable them to operate in a distributed hybrid manner, they're going to eat your everything. They're going to have you. They're going to have you for breakfast.
Do you see
because they are going to be incredibly
they're competitive and they can offer and they become location agnostic. I think there's a variety of reasons why they become more lean and operationally effective. But do you think that there's been a power shift from management to the broader workforce? I always imagine prior to COVID, it was easy and at the time fair to say, we can't trust that our employees won't take the mick going off and working from home. Therefore, we have to maintain this. And I get the rationale. Now that we've seen people can work effectively, and arguably they work longer hours, and actually some people it's less healthy because there's no separation between work and there's all the reasons why we know people working harder. Do you think now people say, well, actually, I'm not coming back. I'm going to go elsewhere. Do you think there's now been a shift in, and we saw it with Apple when they announced, and Apple have built the world's
5 billion, the best office in the world
on the planet, Anthony, on the planet. I mean, it's just the most fantastic, beautiful, well thought out, constructed and developed piece of technology that is an office, and people are like, nah, I kind of want to stay home in my tracksuit bottoms and eat Ben and Jerry's in the morning. Like, if they can't get people to come back on their demand and are willing to put their pen to paper, is there now this shift where actually the power's with the employees and they've been unionized? They can come together and say, hold on, we don't want to come back. And now, to your point with these companies, I'm actually going to go get a job elsewhere and online. And it feels like it's broken some of that really clear structural hierarchy that existed pre-COVID.
I think, yes, the Gordian knot has definitely been rent asunder. I would say the answer is yes and no, and Draw writes well and a lot about this. His argument would be that we are moving into a world where, for top talent, they get anything they want, where they want, when they want, how much, doesn't matter. The difficulty is if you're average, if you haven't got something that isn't easily replicable. And that is going to be a problem. But this is going to be a problem for companies. To what extent, if they try and enforce inflexibility, they will lose people. It completely depends who they lose. You know, if you lose your top 15%, then you're really in trouble. You know, so much depends on industry as well here. You know, a lot of this is driven by what the software companies do, and of course, software is peculiarly well suited, surprisingly enough, for remote. Even though prior to COVID, it was the software companies that spent the most money on offices, indulging their staffing in offices, but it is the most well suited. And in a lot of jobs, you do need to get together. You know, I'm an absolute believer that almost everyone needs to get together relatively regularly. So it might be once or twice a week. It might be once or twice a fortnight, a month or quarterly, or maybe it's only 6 months. But it does help to be able to get together every now and again, which again is why I'm actually both short and very long offices. You know, I think really great offices that enable me to do what I want to do when I want to meet these people are going to do really well. And it also depends on the type of industry. You know, you have Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan saying, on your bikes, guy, back to the office. But then, you know, anyone who works for JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, well, they've sold their soul for the job anyway. You know, that's the trade, isn't it? I'm going to work for Goldman Sachs because they're going to pay me stupid amounts of money and they're going to own me for 10 years and then I'll be rich. That's the game. So they can, then it's a bit like, you shouldn't really think about what JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs do, and you shouldn't really think of what Google's doing, because these companies are not normal. They're extremes. They're not normal. My feeling and my advice to all companies goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You have to really delve into what are the wants, needs, and desires of your employees. What do they need to perform their job as well as possible? And what do their teams need? Salesforce have a really interesting thing, that what they've done is they're working on the assumption that even though they're a huge company, most people work in a team, and teams tend to not be that big. So they've said to every team they have to do something called a team agreement, and the team has to say what they want. So we need to be in the office every Wednesday, and we need 14 meeting rooms. We want lunch, we want this, we want that, we want breakfast, we want this AV, that AV. What do we want? That's what we want. What do we need in real estate terms to perform our jobs as well as possible? And that has to be the way forward, and that's going to be different for every single company. So there is no one answer. The one answer there is it's completely dependent upon wants, needs, and desires of your individuals, your teams and what they need in real estate terms to be as effective as possible. Give them that. Whatever it is that is, give them that. And then you win.
Agreed. And you are seeing increasingly, at least where we are seeing greater decentralization of decision making, which is great because if you are a dev squad, your needs are very different. Some devs love working into the night. It's weird. Why would you shoehorn somebody or a team into an infrastructure with an optimum? Why would you throw them into an office where there's so much noise? And if you're working a really hard bit of development, what you don't need is like necessarily water cooler breaks. You want to get in the zone, and once you finish that, you might want to decompress for 2 hours and play a video game or go for a walk. We need to reflect people's working habits in the offices. And there's one thing that it was brought up, I think, maybe by Goldman's in particular, but also I have heard it, and there is some value to it. I want to know what your thoughts are. Is there is an argument which says one thing which is hard to replicate outside the office is that of shadowing. So particularly in certain industries, if I'm a graduate surveyor, if I'm a graduate solicitor, if I'm a banker, I pick up a lot passively from my environment. Once you're established and you're running a team, yes, you know what you're doing. How do we reconcile that need to learn from those around us when we are most of the time, or potentially more of the time, physically isolated? Do we need to change the way we train people, or do we need to have, again, a model which allows that visibility?
I think we do need to come up with different ways. I was talking to a very senior lawyer about this recently, and law firms, the classic problem in a law firm, you need the junior in there too. Actually, this is really interesting. Part of the problem law firms have is that historically, the new people would learn by doing all this grunt work for years on end. Here's a room full of documents, read them all. Of course, they don't do that anymore because AI does it for them. So that whole task has just disappeared. So they need to learn in different ways. But they were talking about there is a lot of need to shadow, a bit like being a junior, a junior, and you've got to watch your QC in operation. But one of these lawyers said to me, actually, what we've been doing during lockdown is I've had my junior sit in all my Zoom meetings. So they're just there, don't say anything, sit in the corner, shut up, but they sit in. But again, it comes back to if it makes sense for me to sit with my junior for a day a week, then do it. The point is you almost definitely don't need it for 5 days a week. Or it needs to be more purposeful. It's not just, the whole thing about serendipity. I'd really love to know how many people have actually ever come up with anything interesting in front of a water cooler or overheard anything. It's really once in a blue moon. I mean, I remember I went to MIPIM for about 9 years, I think, and actually only ever got one really interesting thing out of it. It happened to be a real blinder, and it made up for the rest. But otherwise, but you don't. But I think we're fine. We've been much more deliberate about what we want to do, and the serendipity is partly a myth, but partly can be done by having better systems. People who run really good Slack channels or have really good internal knowledge networks. One of the things about being remote or distributed is that you need to document things a lot more, because Michael's over there and he's working on US time, I'm working on UK time, and I'm doing something this morning and he's not going to know what it is, so I need to document it. And so you'll find distributed companies do document a lot more. So you put down a lot more. So you take a lot of that tacit knowledge and you turn it into, what's the opposite of tacit knowledge? Real knowledge, embedded knowledge, whatever it is. The knowledge that you just have that just sits in your brain. When you talk to someone and said, "Oh, I haven't got it written down, but I know, don't worry, it's all in my mind." It's no good in your mind. Get it down somewhere. So I think think we will find that we're doing a mix of things. We'll still do some of the physical stuff, but we will also document things a lot better, and we'll get that information down. So there's not.
So these are all interesting changes, and then we've got the benefit of your academy as like this real life feedback loop, because you're talking to people really across the world, globally, from all industries. Are people coming to you out of fear, or are they coming to you out of ignorance, or are they coming to you out of inspiration? And I know that there's definitely a Venn diagram where all those three things meet, but ultimately, why are people coming to you? And after that, what's the most common thing you're learning from people? Because I imagine it's fascinating for you to have all these people sharing their hopes, dreams, and fears.
People are doing our course out of inspiration, and it is, to an extent, it's sort of self-selecting. You've actually got to be quite entrepreneurial, innovative mindset to actually want to do a course like ours in the first place. So we have been really lucky to attract a wide range of, from 20-year-olds to 60-year-olds, across from small companies to monster companies. But I think overall people are doing it because they're seeing that the real estate world is fundamentally changing. And unless you happen to be an incumbent of the old school who's spent decades nicely receiving your checks every four times a year and really haven't needed to do very much, the world for them is getting harder. But for everyone else, the opportunity is getting much bigger, because once real estate becomes much more about delivering a service than selling a product, who defines that service, who creates that service, who curates that service is the person who gets the spoils. So the opportunity to create new business models, new form factors, new ethoses, new aesthetics, new everything is I think really, really exciting. Or certainly from the people we've had on the course, is really, really exciting. They're looking at how can we produce real estate that serves our users better. And in terms of you asked about what are the big things they're picking up on, is a lot to do with this individuality and creating a product for a particular market. That everyone, or pretty well everyone, is thinking about, well, my market is these types, my market is these types, my market is these types. What can I create from? It's very analogous to, of course, the hotel world. You can have great companies at either end. I can go into a Premier Inn and it's fantastic. It is what it is. It does exactly what you want it to do. Or I can go into a Four Seasons, which is a completely different thing, and that's also fantastic. But it's to serve different markets, and it's designed and created and curated for different markets. And we have a lot of people who are looking to how can we create, and this is either with their own companies or in their working for bigger companies. What do we need to create? How do we get to understand our customers better, and how do we give our customers more of what they want? So it's very much around this notion of the real estate industry turning into a service. Yeah, it's space as a service.
I was about to say, if only somebody could have coined a phrase, space as a service.
A phrase for it. The other thing that's interesting globally, though, is we have not yet come across anyone who hasn't said they want more flexibility as individuals. South America, Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, everyone wants flexibility. Everyone at an individual level. You say to people, what do you want? How would you change your office? What would you like? Well, first of all, I'd like to use it more flexibly. Most people want their office. Most people just want a much better office
Agreed.
that they can use when they need to.
Well, it has to be, Anthony,
to
because
use that.
if at home, if for me, it's the question is, uh, there's an opportunity cost to going to the office, and it's things that have become important to me. Now, back to our original point, I will go in if what I can do there is exponentially better, or enjoyable, or better than what I can do at home. So flexibility means choice, but then it puts the onus on the provider of those services to justify that decision. And I wouldn't be surprised if people will spend eventually, possibly, 5 days which are broken down half here, half there, if it's worth going to. You know, I may want at home, I've got basic coffee. At home, I've got a basic desk. At home, I've got basic amenities for air quality. Now, if you can provide that, I think that we can get to a point of greater office occupancy through giving people the choice. But that choice needs to be made because what you've delivered is really brilliant. Like, I mean, one thing that I know when we're doing creative sessions, I'd like a whiteboard. I do want to talk. I do want to move things along.
Yeah.
But our current offices can't facilitate big meetings. One thing that I found fascinating is that it seems just insane and archaic and beyond fathomable that pre-COVID, we would have to sometimes push back meetings into the future until we get an office space. That would mean a room. So we'd have to wait. So it's an important meeting. That meeting couldn't happen until we could find a physical space in the building to allow us all to be there, or for everyone to be in the building. Whereas now, within 5 seconds, I can bring 40 people into a meeting, and we're all present.
Exactly.
And some people might be on their car going, but going somewhere. They're on their phone. So it's the on-demand nature of collaboration that is very hard to replicate. Unless, to your point, these offices are built to cater towards that. These ideas of banks of desks. It's weird. I'm going to go to sit at a desk. No, you need to make me deliver something I can't do at home.
It's absolutely the critical point. And I went around 22 Bishopsgate the other day, which is the largest new building.
What's it called? What do they call it? A vertical village?
Vertical village. Was it? The whole point
we lost you for a minute. Go on. So we were on Vertical Village.
Okay. Yes, a Vertical Village, 1.3 million square feet, 110,000 square meters. It's a monster. But the key value proposition of that building is that it is, to use a rather good new phrase, it's full stack. So there's lots of different types. There's restaurants in there, there's event spaces in there, there's flex spaces in there, there's meeting room venues in there, there's entertainment space, there's short-term office space, there's long-term office space, there's everything. So exactly to your point of we don't have a room suitable for this meeting, therefore we can't have it. In a building like that, you don't even contemplate having that space in the first place. You rent that on demand from the building. The building as amenity. Now, obviously, you need a big building. You need lots of scale. But the conception of you should only take the space that you can operate at, say, 70% occupancy. Because we're all sitting there and building in spaces that are 50% occupied. We're spending half our money for nothing. You want to be running a space at higher occupancy. So you just take what there's always going to be 50 people in here. Out of 300 of us, there's always going to be 50. If we need more, we rent that on demand. But to actually manage, to actually create that amenity is a big deal. You clearly need a pretty big building, or you're going to need a network of spaces closely together. But my argument would be, and I've said it for a while, that the historic game was to rent someone as much space as possible for as long as possible. I think the new game is to rent people the least amount of space for the shortest amount of time, and sell them everything else.
Well, it comes.
But the point is, you'll be selling them at more. You'll be generating more money. Because if instead of taking 1,000 square meters, I take 500, but I pay 750's worth. So I pay 50% more. I'm still saving money, but I will pay more for the perfect amenities.
It's backing yourself and your products, and rather than hoodwinking people into taking long contracts and then treat it as recurring revenue, you say, hold on, we back ourselves to the point where we understand our customers enough, where we can take away that certainty of revenue and be confident that in the long term we'll make more because of the flexibility. And that's a whole different mindset. Because as you say, there's a reason why pension funds bought office buildings, because it was secure, reliable income. That's where you go to for security. But I think it puts pressure on the provider of these physical spaces to really think. It was very easy to deliver. Here's a building. It's shell. Do what you want with it. Yeah. I'm not trying to undermine the challenge, but it's pretty straightforward. Go do what you want. Now you've got to think. Who's going to take it? Why are they going to take it? How they're going to take it? What's expected of us? That's a whole different dynamic. It's a different mindset for organisations to get their head around. In I guess what is a relatively short time. I know we talk about revolution versus evolution, but within a relatively short period of time, it's a completely how we buy things changes. Who we work with changes. So again, I'm sure it's the best prepared people for this will be the winners. So overall, where are you on 22 Bishopsgate? Are you big thumbs up?
I love the building. I was saying to someone who's from them, the paradox is in some ways you could say the last thing you want is a bloody great skyscraper when everyone going, well, I'm not sure we're going to go up in the skyscraper. But actually this building's going to do great, because if you're not here all the time, or if you need that flexibility, where am I going to go? I'm going to go there. I'm probably going to go and hang out there, because but being in the particular building actually becomes very, very meaningful. The building actually ends up as a status symbol apart from anything else.
Well, I like the idea that you go there in the morning for your workout. You then you pop in some flex space and personal time. You meet the team for co-working spaces. You then have a work meeting with some outside in one of the bars, and then you have a team meeting lunch. Again, it becomes more than an office. It becomes a reflection of your flexibility, but in a weird way, it's still in a single location. But again, the cost of that building, the investment in it from a technical perspective, for that to scale down, it's unique in its position there. But again, I could see myself doing that, spending the day there, and the whole thing being experiential. I can either be at home in my joggers and hunch over a laptop, or I can spend the day in a world-class building. I get that, but that's unique at this point in time. It's a unique proposition.
There's a lot of space that isn't that.
A lot of space.
That's where I think all this becomes very interesting, and it's again why I'm both long and short. I'm very long on a building that can do everything the modern world needs. But what the hell do you do with a 30,000 square foot
small floor plates? Places like a Marylebone that you walk up onto above a shop and it's just a room. That room is like your home kitchen. Why would you justify that? And that's a really fascinating thing to understand, is what are those landlords thinking? What are they doing? What can they do?
Yeah, I can see taking older buildings a character. I'm not one that says, a Georgian building is useless. I had the best office I ever had was in Berkeley Square, really old building, but it was just fabulous, completely inefficient and everything, but it was great. And people will take those types of spaces. So the things with a little bit of character, or that is a bit like having, as you say, it's a space above a shop, but it's very convenient. It's in town. It's not costing me too much, and I can have a small space there. Okay, but the mid-size, ordinary, ugly buildings that you could get I'd rather have a really interesting, slightly scrappy building than a BCO spec or ordinary building without much scale, because you've got to really work hard to make it worthwhile. You've got to really work hard to make it work. I think the game is getting really hard,
I agree.
And there's no way around that. I can sort of go on and all this sort of idealistic stuff. But frankly, that is what the customer wants, and they're going to want that. How the hell are you going to provide it? And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy.
And that soundbite, it's not going to be easy. It's probably a great way to draw to an end. We could talk for hours, and I don't think anyone will listen past the first 5 minutes, given people's time things. And I think maybe next time we talk again about more things. But thank you for your time. Like, honestly, I feel like if we didn't have the time here, we'd be going to tomorrow, and you'd have to bring out a new linen shirt. Thank you for listening to Pixel Chasing, and well done for making it right to the end. If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to share with others who you think may also enjoy it. And to be kept up to date with all they're up to here, you can always follow us on the usual channels. On Twitter, we are @PixelChasing. On Instagram, we are @PixelChasing. And if you want to join our newsletter to be kept up to date with all future episodes, you can join that on our website, which is pixelchasing.com. Thank you. See you next time.